In this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe, leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care family and friends. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I am your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so glad that you made space to be here today. Now, before we get into this episode, do me a quick favor. If you're feeling the vibe, go ahead and show us some love. Tap that screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need you to share this out with someone who may need a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here, or you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel, so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite you to check out our digital home at theselfcareclub.org, where you will find everything from affirmative apparel to motivational merch and a ton of free resources to nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported every step of the way. Just know that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I encourage you to give yourself permission to pause, to reflect, and to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly for you. And if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop a green heart in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Today's episode is all about the truth, right? And when I say the truth, I'm more so talking about the truth about fresh starts. One truth that I've learned in my healing journey is that you don't get a fresh start without honesty. So today we're going to talk about fresh starts. And again, the part that nobody likes to admit, which is you don't get a real one without honesty. And when I say honesty, I'm talking about with yourself and with others. Let's just be real for a moment. We love to romanticize it, right? Lady Blue, welcome in, sis. We love the idea of the fresh start, right? We attach it to new calendars, clean planners, vision boards, right? Affirmations. We tell ourselves all the time, once this season ends, things are going to be different. Once I get through this month, I'll feel better. Once they change, I can breathe again. But here's the truth that we don't always want to sit with. Most of us aren't craving a fresh start. We're craving relief. Relief from discomfort that we don't want to name. Relief from choices that we don't want to take responsibility for. Relief from the quiet knowing that something in our life is no longer aligned. Unique Creations, welcome in, Queen. So we chase the aesthetic of new, right? Instead of the work of honesty. We change the routine. We rearrange our space. We distance ourselves from the feeling, but we don't address the truth. And because of that, the fresh start never sticks. We carry the same patterns into new rooms, right? The same people pleasing into new relationships, the same overgiving into new commitments, the same silence into new versions of ourselves. And then we wonder why nothing feels different. A fresh start that avoids accountability is just a reset of the same cycle. You don't need a new environment if you're still operating from old beliefs. You don't need a new chapter if you're still reading the same lesson. And just like all of our podcasts, this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you get your power back. And so a real fresh start doesn't come with fireworks, right? It comes with a quiet, uncomfortable realization that says, I can't keep doing this to myself. Right? It's the moment that you admit, I'm staying because it feels familiar, not because it's healthy. I'm tired, but I'm also avoiding change. I keep calling this patience, but really it's self-abandonment. And that honesty, that's just the beginning, right? That's the beginning work. Not a planner, not a post, not a promise that you'll make, when you're emotionally high. But the moment that you stop lying to yourself about what this season is costing you, that's when the fantasy of fresh starts turns into a real fresh start. And, that kind of beginning may not look pretty, but it will finally be honest. So let's get into the truth that you've been dodging, right? And we'll slow this part down because I think that this is where things get a little tender, where, we start to feel our toes being stepped on, or we're a little sensitive. But there's a truth that you don't need a sign for. You don't need to make some big announcement about this. You don't need confirmation. You don't need one more conversation, one more prayer, one more, let me see how things play out. You already know. And so the dodging doesn't look like denial at first. It looks like rationalizing, right? It looks like you tell yourself it's not that bad, or they didn't mean it like that. I'm probably overreacting. Let me give it one more chance, one more shot. But I want you to listen closely, because truth has a sound, right? Truth sounds like that sigh you let out when you're all alone. Truth sounds like your body tensing before your mouth says yes. Truth sounds like exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. You've been dodging it, not because you're weak, but because acknowledging it would mean that something has to change. And change costs, right? It costs us the familiarity of things. It costs us comfort. It costs identities that you've worn to survive. And so sometimes the truth that you're avoiding isn't about them at all, right? It has nothing to do with them at all. It's about admitting that you've outgrown this, that you're staying because leaving feels scary, that you're loyal to what actually is hurting you, or that you keep hoping that this will turn into something that you already know it won't. And I think that that's something that's hard to face, especially when you've invested so much time and love and energy and parts of yourself. So instead, you postpone the truth. You stay busy. You stay distracted. You stay strong for everybody else. But that avoidance doesn't make the truth disappear. It just makes it louder inside your body. Thank you for the heart me. Right? That tension that you feel in your chest, that heaviness that you carry when you first wake up, that quiet resentment that you don't talk about, those are all messages. And here's what I want to say to you with so much care. Truth doesn't show up to punish you. It shows up to set you free. The truth that, you've been dodging is not here to shame you for staying too long. It's here to remind you that you're allowed to choose differently now, right? You didn't miss your moment. You didn't fail the lesson. You were learning it in real time. You were learning at a pace that your nervous system could handle. But at some point, healing starts to whisper to you, telling you that you don't have to keep carrying this. And when you finally stop dodging the truth, not to judge yourself, not to rush a decision, but just simply acknowledging it, that's when clarity starts to breathe. And no, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not dramatically, but it's enough for you to take the next honest step. And sometimes that is just simply asking, that it's just asking for you to be honest with yourself. And so let's talk about why honesty feels so hard, right? Why does this part feel so heavy? And when you think about it, honesty isn't just facts, right? It's about safety. I think that for many of us, honesty was never modeled as something safe. It was something that led to consequences, right? Growing up, telling the truth might have meant being punished instead of protected, being misunderstood instead of supported, or even being told that you were too sensitive, too dramatic, you're doing too much. So we learned very early on that survival required you to edit yourself, to downplay yourself. You learned how to read the room, soften your needs, how to swallow your feelings so things wouldn't escalate. And that skill, it served its purpose, right? It had its place. It kept you alive. It kept you, navigating in spaces that really weren't built to handle your truth. But I think the part that we don't always acknowledge is that survival skills can become self-betrayal when the danger is gone. Honesty feels hard for many of us now because our nervous system still think that truth equals a threat. Your body remembers, right? It remembers, if I say how I really feel, I might lose love. If I'm honest, I might be rejected. If I admit this isn't working, I'll have to face change, and I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. So instead of honesty, you choose what's familiar. Instead of truth, you choose endurance. Instead of clarity, you continue just coping. And there's nothing wrong with you for that. You're not weak, right? You were just adapting. And the thing about healing is that it asks a new question. It asks, what if the environment has changed, but your coping hasn't? See, if you look around you now, many of us live in houses that look completely different than where we started from, right? We've moved to new cities, bigger houses, we've done all these things, but our coping hasn't shifted. What if honesty no longer puts you in danger, but dishonesty keeps you stuck? This is why honesty feels so emotional, not logical, right? Because it asks you to unlearn the belief that being real will cost you everything. It also asks you to sit with the uncomfortable emotions, right? The grief, the disappointment, the anger that you were never allowed to feel, the sadness that you kept pushing down just to stay functional. And that's a lot for anybody. So if you've been avoiding honesty, it doesn't mean that you lack courage. It just means that your body is asking for a gentleness that you have to relearn when it comes to your safety. But again, honesty is not confrontation. Honesty is self-connection. It's you saying that I am allowed to acknowledge my experience. I am allowed to name what hurts. I don't have to perform strength to be worthy of care. You don't have to announce your truth to the world, right? You don't have to stand from the highest mountaintop and sing to the entire world. You don't have to blow anything up today. Sometimes honesty just begins quietly with you admitting just to yourself that this is heavier than I'm letting on. This is more than what I'm making it. And that admission alone, that's not weakness. That's the moment that healing finally has something real to work with. I think that many of us don't get the desired results when it comes to our healing because, we don't have anything real to hold on to. We don't have anything real to work with. And so we have to understand that clarity isn't loud, it's consistent. Right? I think this is the part where we get tripped up a lot because we think that clarity we think that clarity is supposed to, come in with fireworks. It's supposed to be like some big moment or a last straw, right? Something undeniable enough to justify the change that we already feel brewing on the inside. But most clarity doesn't shout, it just repeats, right? It shows up quietly over and over again in the same feelings, the same tension, the same thought that you keep circling back to no matter how much you try to move past it. Clarity sounds like I'm tired of having the same conversations with myself. I feel relief when I imagine not doing this anymore. Or I don't feel safe, seen, or settled here, and I keep ignoring that. See, that's not confusion. That's information, right? But because it's not dramatic, we dismiss it. We say, maybe I'm just in my feelings. Maybe I'm overthinking, or maybe I just need to push through. Because that's what society tells us to do, right? Push through. And listen, sometimes pushing through is necessary. But sometimes pushing through is just another way to override your intuition. Clarity doesn't always come with a yes or a no. Sometimes it comes as discomfort that won't let you rest. Right? It's the way your energy shifts when you agree to something that you don't want to. It's the heaviness that creeps in before you arrive somewhere. Elevated Awakenings, Kale, welcome in. Thank you for the heart me. It's the calm that you feel when you imagine choosing yourself, followed by guilt for even thinking about choosing yourself. And that pattern, that consistency, that is all just clarity speaking in a language that your body understands. Right? Thank you, JC. And so if you're waiting for clarity to feel convenient, I hate to tell you, you're going to be waiting for a long time. India, welcome in, beautiful. Elevated Awakenings to you. Clarity often comes before you're ready. Before you have a plan, right? Before you know how it's all going to work out. And that doesn't mean that you have to act immediately, but it does mean that you stop pretending you don't hear it. Right? You don't need one more sign. You don't need permission. You don't need a crisis to validate your knowing. If something keeps returning to your spirit, if the discomfort keeps repeating, or if the misalignment won't let you settle, that is clarity. not rushing you, not shaming you, just asking you to listen. Because when you stop waiting for clarity to scream and you start respecting the way that it whispers to you consistently, you begin to trust yourself again. And when we think about trust, that's what real healing is calling for, right? That's where the real healing starts to feel steady. And I think something else that I want to address that I don't think that we talk about enough is that I need for people to stop calling it healing if you're still lying to yourself. I think that this part may feel a little confrontational if you're not ready to hear it, and maybe a little more liberating if you are ready to hear it. But either way, I think it needs to be said. We use the word healing a lot, right? And we say it with good intentions. We say it because we want it to be true. But sometimes what we call healing is really just high functioning survival. You can be praying, journaling, listening to all the podcasts, speaking affirmations, and doing all the right things, right? And still be lying to yourself about what hurts. Healing is not how calm you look on the outside. Healing is not how much you can tolerate without complaining. Healing is not how well you can explain away your pain. So if you're a person who's still saying, I'm fine when you're not, or you say, it doesn't bother me anymore when really it does, or I'm healed from that when you still tense up in that, that is not healing, my love. That's endurance. And endurance will burn you out every single time. Every single time. And so here's where we get honest without being cruel to ourselves. Right? Understanding that many of us learned that acknowledging pain meant falling apart. So we avoid naming it altogether. We learn to stay productive, stay spiritual, stay strong. But healing doesn't ask you to be strong. It asks you to be true. And truth doesn't require you to have the solutions. It just requires you to stop gaslighting your own experience. This isn't about dwelling in the pain. It's about acknowledging it. Because pain that you refuse to name doesn't disappear. It just relocates. And when I say it relocates, I'm talking about into your body, into your sleep, into your tone, into your relationships. You don't owe anyone a version of you that is over it. You just owe yourself the honesty. And honesty sounds like saying, this still hurts. This still bothers me. I thought I was past this, but I'm not. I'm tired of pretending like this doesn't affect me. And understand that that's not regression. That is awareness. If I've learned nothing else on my healing journey, it is simply that healing is not linear. It does not definitely have an aesthetic to it. Some days healing looks like peace. Other days healing looks like tears that you've been holding back for years. And both are valid. And so I want to say this gently, but clearly. You cannot heal what you keep minimizing. You cannot heal what you continue to pretend that you don't feel. You cannot free yourself from what you refuse to name. Healing does not begin when the pain ends. It begins when the lying stops. And the moment that you allow yourself to say that something is still tender here, That's the moment that you create space for real healing to move, not perform. And so that honesty right there, that's not weakness. That is courage, right? That's courage finally choosing truth over appearance. And that choice alone will change everything. So if you feel like you've been doing this healing thing wrong, perhaps you've been lying to yourself somewhere. Perhaps it's time for you to be honest with yourself. So if you're looking for a fresh start, I need for you to really, truly start being honest with yourself. And it's important to also note that fresh starts require grief. See, this is the part of healing that nobody else is talking about. Nobody posts about, right? This is the part that nobody puts a caption on. The part that we try to skip over because we feel like it contradicts moving on. But you cannot have a fresh start without grief, because every real beginning also has an ending. And endings hurt, even when they're necessary, right? And sometimes you're not grieving a person. Sometimes you're grieving hope. Hope that they would change. Hope that it would finally feel different, or hope that all the effort and patience and love would pay off in the way that you imagined. Sometimes you're grieving a version of yourself, right? The one who believed longer, the one who tried harder, the one who stayed soft in places that required armor. And so when that happens, welcome in, CC. Thank you for the heart me. When that happens, grief can feel confusing because part of you knows that leaving or changing or letting go is the right thing, while another part of you is still attached to all that could have been. But that grief doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice. It means that you made, that you had a real emotional investment in something. We've been taught that if something was unhealthy, that we shouldn't miss it. That if we're healing, we shouldn't feel sad about what we're releasing. But that's a lie. You can grieve what hurt you. You can miss what no longer deserves access to you. You can cry over something you're still choosing to walk away from. And so grief is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of honesty. And when you don't allow yourself to grieve, right, you carry unfinished emotions into the next season. Thank you for the heart puffs. Right? That's when that bitterness shows up. The resentment starts to harden. And that's when you say, I'm over it, but your body really says otherwise. Fresh starts don't require you to rush your healing. They require you to feel it, to sit with the sadness, to honor the disappointment, and to acknowledge the anger that you never felt safe expressing. Grief is the release valve that makes room for peace, right? That makes room for you to breathe again. And a truth that might surprise you, you don't grieve because you're stuck. You actually grieve because you're moving on, right? You're letting go of who you were so you can become who you are now. So if you find yourself mourning something while stepping into alignment, if the tears, show up right as you choose yourself, if the sadness and relief coexist in the same breath, that does not mean you are confused. That means that you are healing honestly. And family, when you allow grief its rightful place, the fresh start won't be fragile. It'll be grounded. So give yourself the opportunity to grieve, whatever that looks like. And so there are some signs that you can look out for, if you're standing at the door of alignment, right? Because I think that some of us don't even know when we're getting ourselves aligned, right? And I think that this is how you know that something is shifting. Not because everything feels clear, but because certain things no longer feel possible for you to ignore. See, alignment doesn't announce itself loudly. It just reorders your tolerance, right? Things that you used to brush off sit heavy now. Conversations that you once forced now drain you. Spaces that you used to shrink in now feel unbearable. Goddess Telly, welcome in. Thank you for the heart me. Right? So now these things start to feel unbearable. And instead of asking what's wrong with me, you start saying, why does this no longer fit? That question alone is a sign of growth. And so here are some signs that you're standing right at the door of alignment. And you might recognize yourself in more than one of them. The first one is you're tired of explaining your pain away. You don't want to justify your feelings anymore. You don't want to convince yourself to stay comfortable. You feel relief when you imagine choosing yourself, even when the guilt shows up right behind it. See, that relief is information. That, the guilt is the conditioning, but the relief that you feel is the information. Because again, remember, your body speaks before your mouth does. We're talking about a tight chest, a knotted stomach, sudden fatigue when it's time to show up somewhere you don't want to be. Your nervous system is done negotiating with misalignment, right? You crave peace more than applause. Thank you, CC. You'd rather be misunderstood than overextended. You'd rather be quiet than perform. And here's a big one. You no longer feel the need to announce your boundaries. Right? You're not arguing. You're not explaining. You're not seeking validation. You're just done. Done shrinking. Done overgiving. Done betraying yourself for the sake of keeping things smooth. Right? And I think that this is where people often label you as different or colder, distant, hard to read. But what's really happening is that you're no longer available for what cost you your peace. You finally realize that if something is costing you your peace, it's too expensive. So alignment doesn't make you loud, it makes you clear. And clarity changes how you move. Once you start to get clear on situations, you don't rush decisions, but you also don't ignore your knowing. You move slower, more intentional, more rooted. So if life feels quieter but heavier in certain moments, if you feel less reactive but more aware, if you're choosing distance without drama, you're not lost. You're standing right at the edge of alignment, deciding whether you trust yourself enough to step through. But family, I promise you, once you do, there's no going back to who you pretended to be. So I need for you to understand that honesty is an act of self-respect. Right? Let's reframe, how we see ourselves. Understanding that honesty is not cruelty. Honesty is not confrontation. Honesty is not you being too much. Honesty is self-respect in action. See, for a long time, many of us were taught that being loving meant being flexible, that being kind meant being quiet, and that being spiritual meant being agreeable. So we learned to bend. We learned to accommodate, to prioritize harmony over truth. But here's the thing that nobody told us. Every single time you lie to yourself to keep the peace, you teach yourself that your needs come last. And so that lesson keeps seeping into everything. Honesty is the moment that you stop abandoning yourself behind closed doors. It's when you say, I don't feel good here, even if you don't know what to do next. Just acknowledging that I don't feel good here, right? It's when you admit that I'm uncomfortable without turning that discomfort into some sort of self-blame. See, self-respect doesn't always look bold. Sometimes it's just a quiet truth. It looks like not over-explaining your no, not volunteering for what drains you, not staying just to avoid disappointing other people. Honesty doesn't demand that you expose your truth to everyone. Some of our truths are sacred. Some truths are private. Some truths are just for you and God and your journal. But when you're honest with yourself, your decisions begin to align naturally. You stop forcing. You stop convincing. You stop negotiating with your intuition. And when you do that, something powerful happens. You start trusting yourself again. And that trust is going to show up in how you move, right? You speak less, but you mean more. You choose slower, but wiser. You stop asking, is this okay? And you start asking, is this aligned? And I think that the deepest part of this truth is that the moment you choose honestly, the moment that you choose honesty, you choose dignity. You tell yourself that my feelings are valid, that my experience does matter, that I don't need permission to honor my truth. And when that honesty becomes a practice, not a reaction, your fresh start stops being fragile. It becomes rooted and intentional. And most importantly, it becomes yours. Because a life built on honesty doesn't require constant rebuilding. It just requires maintenance. And by maintenance, I mean boundaries, right? And the courage to keep choosing yourself again and again, even when things are uncomfortable. And so contrary to what society has taught us, that's not selfish. That's healed. And that kind of honesty, that's the strongest form of self-love that there is. Boundaries are amazing, right? Like that's my jam. I love me a good old boundary. So yeah, I guess as I close today, I would want to, leave with a breath or an affirmation or a beginning, right? Because I think that those are things that we have to think about. And I want to make sure that, everything that came up for you today, I want to stress the importance of not judging it, not rushing to fix it, just acknowledging it. If this episode stirred something in you, if it made you feel seen or called out or emotional, quiet, or maybe even just a little uncomfortable, that wasn't an accident. That is honesty finding its way to you. And I want you to remember that you don't owe anyone a rushed version of your healing. You don't owe anyone a polished explanation of your truth. You don't owe anyone access to a version of you that's finally learning how to breathe. Fresh starts aren't about pretending that the past didn't happen. They're about honoring it without letting it ruin your future. They're about choosing yourself without turning that choice into a punishment. They're about telling the truth without tearing yourself down for how long it took you to get there. So wherever you are right now, whether you're driving, cleaning, laying in bed, taking a walk, whatever, I just want you to take a breath with me. Inhale from your nose. Exhale slowly from your mouth. Again, inhale from your nose. Exhale from your mouth. One last time. Inhale. And exhale. Your affirmations for today would be, I choose honesty over comfort. Hey, Paris, welcome in. Thank you for that, Goddess Telly. I'm glad it found you. I choose honesty over comfort. I choose honesty over comfort. I trust myself enough to tell the truth. I trust myself enough to tell the truth. I trust myself enough to tell the truth. I release what no longer fits. I release what no longer fits. I release what no longer fits. And our last affirmation would be, I am allowed to begin again with integrity. I am allowed to begin again with integrity. I am allowed to begin again with integrity. You don't have to make a big decision today. You don't have to confront anyone tomorrow. Sometimes the bravest thing that you can do is to simply stop lying to yourself and just sit with the truth until it shows you your next step. If today's episode gave you language for something that you've been feeling but couldn't quite name, if it gave you permission to stop carrying what's been heavy, if it reminded you that you're not broken, you're becoming, drop a green heart in the chat. You know, that's our community's way of saying that I'm healing, I'm growing, I'm choosing me. So if today's a day that you're deciding to choose you, drop some green hearts in the chat. Elevated Awakening Spark Motive Daily. Welcome in, bro. Yes, I see some green hearts. I got you, Goddess Telly. Harris got some green hearts over on YouTube. I see y'all. And listen, family, before we part ways, let me leave you all with a little love and light. As always, I encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even when it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. Thank you, India. This has been another Room to Breathe podcast, and I cannot wait to connect with you all again soon. Thank you.